Hi guys, Becky here, and we are here for another interview of the Halfie project. And today, my guest here is Cedric.
Thank you for having me. My name is Cedric, and I'm originally from the United States. I was born there, and I also grew up there most of my life, and I currently live here in Daejeon, South Korea. I teach English right now, but I'm also a YouTuber, and I'm also a music producer, so...
Yeah? Oh, cool, that's cool. Okay, so you grew up in the States,
I did.
What you said?
Yeah.
So which of your parents is Korean?
So my mom is Korean.
Okay, your mom's Korean.
Yes.
Your dad's American.
Yes.
All right. And you're half Korean, half black.
Correct.
So why did you come to Korea?
I've always wondered what it was like to live in Korea.
Yeah.
So I remember being a kid, and my mom, she would watch like the Korean news or like the Korean dramas back in the 90s with the VHS tapes.
Yeah.
And
my mom did too.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I remember always thinking as a kid, wow, this place is so different, but it always looks like it's fun, and I've always wanted to just know what it feels like to live there. And as I got older, when I was in high school, I got into the first wave of K-pop, and so I used to follow these K-pop idols and watch these concerts, and I just always wanted to just move here, And
because of K-pop. That
was a big part of it in my
Okay.
teenage years, yeah. And so in 2012, I actually came to Korea for a very short trip, first time ever, and at that point, I was like, wow, I really need to come here and live. And so I don't know how to explain it. It was a very an emotional pull for me. And I don't know. I said, at that point, I said, I have to figure out how to come here.
Yeah.
And so it took me a couple of years, but I finally made it.
Do you think that you would have been so drawn to Korean if you hadn't been half Korean?
That's difficult to say, but I would venture to say probably not. I don't know. There are a select few that were into Korean music, but I don't know if I would have ran with that crowd. So that's hard to say. So I think a big part of my interest comes from the fact that my mom is Korean.
Right. Are you close with your mom?
I am.
You guys are tight?
Yeah.
Does your
close.
mom speak English fluently?
No, she doesn't. Not super fluently. Her English is very, very simple and very basic. And so the way we grew up was she would speak Korean, I would say 90% of the time to me and my sister. Yeah. And I would speak English to her. Yeah. And so that's how we kind of communicated.
I understand. There was a moment, because I didn't grow up speaking Korean. I grew up listening to a lot of Korean, and I think, so my mom would always 밥 먹자, right? She would use this, and you would innately understand what it means.
Right.
But then as I got older and I was studying the language, it was suddenly I had this connection. This is what this word actually means. Because you hear it your whole life, but you actually... there's a meaning behind the word as opposed to the word itself. I don't know if this is making any sense.
No, it makes total sense. Because that's kind of where I am now. Because, as I'm studying Korean and as I am really learning the language more and more, and now that I'm here in Korea, things are really starting to click. Yeah. I'm like, wow. So I knew what that phrase or expression meant, but now I know why it means it. Right. Now I'm starting to understand some of the hanja, behind it. And I'm just mind blown. So I totally get you.
So you didn't grow up speaking Korean either?
No, barely. Outside of just maybe just 안녕하세요, to my mom's friends or whenever we were at church, I would try to speak Korean, but that was it. Yeah.
Do you think learning Korean is helping you understand better yourself or your parents?
This is probably true with all languages and cultures, but a lot of the nuances of the culture is in the Korean language. Right. And the way you perceive situations or even life through the language is different than perceiving it through, say, English. Yeah, so I feel like it's helping me have a better connection to the culture and understanding the culture a lot better.
What about your dad? Are you close with your dad? Do you think there's a side that you feel more related to or connected with?
The story with my father is he actually passed away 8 years ago. And so he had pancreatic cancer. But my dad was always present in our lives. So my dad and mom stayed together up until he passed. And up until that point, we were always pretty close. My dad was a quiet man. He was a hardworking man, and he would always go to work, come home. We would probably eat dinner together, and sometimes on the weekends we would do things. But he was a very quiet man, but he was very involved with his family. So, but I would say the last few years of his life, and, you know, the older that I got, we got even closer because then we were able to have serious conversations, deep conversations, and he would always, what I like to say, just pour into me, like his wisdom, you know. So, and at that point, I really began to understand maybe his history or just how he grew up and some of the situations that he's faced. And so I've always had a close connection with my father, but it wasn't really a cultural type of connection, I would say. It was just because he was my dad.
Yeah.
And then the older that I got, I began to make the ties between his culture and how he grew up, you know, African American, and him as my father, and I began to appreciate that side even more. I would say I was probably a little bit more exposed to my mom's culture, but, you know, I wouldn't say I'm closer to one or the other, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. It just sounds kind of similar to my dad, to be honest, because my dad is also very patient, more on the quieter side, very thoughtful.
Right.
And so I actually say a lot of the success to our family, I guess the marriage of my parents, is a lot of it due to my dad and his just steadiness. But yeah, I also understand spending a lot of time with mom's side because it was also the case with us. I remember having endless evenings where all the moms are just chatting and eating and talking all night long, and the kids are just upstairs, like not really wanting to hang out with each other, but we're just there. You know what I mean? Yeah, I had a lot of those times too. Right. Now, so okay, do you know Carla and Bella by any chance? They're half Korean, half black kid models, and I was just talking with their mom the other day. And they were saying here in Korea, they're always seen as black first. They're not seen as Korean first. But they were born here, they grew up here, their mom is Korean, yet they're always seen as black first. And I was wondering if that's the same case for you in the States. For me, when I'm in the US, I'm the token Asian. Like, doesn't matter whom I'm with, like, I'm always the token Asian. Right. And I was wondering, what is it like for you?
So around my black friends, I had a lot of black friends. I was the Asian guy. Yeah. Right. Even into my adult years, like my friends would, you know, they would call me the Asian, right? And not in a derogatory way. It was, it was fun. But then with my Korean and even half Korean friends growing up, you know, they would always point out the black side. Yeah. Not in a bad way. Right. And so I was always the opposite of whoever I was dealing with. And so I was never really Korean first when it came to like being around Koreans. Even with a lot of my Korean friends, they always highlight the black side, and which is totally cool. But I can see that, you know, a lot of Koreans who aren't used to biracial Koreans, a lot of times they'll highlight the other side first, and they have a hard time accepting, oh, this person can totally identify as Korean culturally, 100%. You know, so yeah, I've had that experience growing up.
What was it like for you when you first came to Korea? A lot of this is like reflecting on my own experiences too, because when I'm hearing you, I'm thinking, okay, there's so many things similar and so different at the same time. So, but anyway, sorry, continue.
No. So when I first came, of course, there was that rush of excitement. You know, it's a new country, it's a new place. I'm finally in the place where I've always wanted to live, right? Right. And then I quickly realized that I'm still the foreigner. You know, I felt like a foreigner. And even when I would try to communicate with Korean people here, whether they're older or maybe I'm at a restaurant or even with some of the newer friends, I kind of felt like I'd had to prove myself that, hey, I am Korean too. You know, I understand Korean culture. And so I think at first, I would kind of easily get offended, I'm not going to lie. But then I realized, you know what? Let me put myself in their shoes, you know, because seeing me is not the norm here. And so I began to take the approach of, you know, instead of me just kind of internally getting a little offended or maybe even hurt, let me take this time to maybe educate, you know, and try to show them that, you know, another way is possible. Yeah. So when I first came, I had to deal with that. But overall, my experience was positive. It was good.
Has it changed anything about the way you view yourself? Personally, when I first came to Korea, half of the reason of coming here was kind of to figure out, like I was saying to you earlier, welcome to the motherland. You know, I'm going to be in a place where people look like me. I didn't grow up with many half Koreans. And so I always had this constant feeling of not really fitting in. no matter where you are.
Right.
And so I thought, if I come here, I'll fit in. And you quickly discover when you come here, you don't fit in. And so for me, it was a really like keen sense of disappointment, and another sense of loss. And so it took me a while to kind of figure out, why did I feel that way, and what do I do with that?
Right.
And it did change a lot of how I view myself, because I was always this individual who was just trying to find that place to belong. It's like the missing puzzle piece, and I know my square exists. But when I came here, I realized that square does not exist. In fact, my whole puzzle just doesn't exist. Right. So now what was I? Was I still a puzzle piece, or was I puzzled myself? And so this really changed, or rather sparked the change that's still happening now, of me discovering who I am, and should I belong anywhere? Do I need to belong anywhere? Maybe I just belong to myself. I don't know. And so I'm wondering, for you, did you ever have any of this introspective thinking, this kind of rediscovery of your own identity? Did it affect you at all?
On one hand, I like to tell people, and I tell people with all honesty, I'm 100% confident in who I am as a person, because yes, I have two different cultures that I represent in a sense, but at the end of the day, I'm me. I'm Cedric. You know, I know what I know. I grew up the way I grew up, and take it or leave it, that's who I am. But at the same time, I'm still trying to figure out, I guess, how to feel or how to belong in a sense here, So I don't really have an answer yet, but I think it's part of the journey of self-discovery. But it's an interesting journey. It's something that I'm welcoming, and it's not comfortable all the time, but it is challenging me in a way to just look at things differently, So I don't know. I'm kind of still figuring that out. So maybe if you have any answers or tips for me, let me know. But.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the purpose of this whole thing. Kind of asking each other, maybe hoping to find some similar grounds and create that community of halfies ourselves.
Right.
Okay, so I was talking with some other half Korean friends, and they were saying a lot of them don't speak to their parents, their half Korean or their Korean side, about this sense of, I guess, unidentity. I don't really know how to describe it. Trying to figure out who you are. They don't talk to their parents about this because their parents also don't understand.
Right.
And I found that to be really kind of sad, and also I could relate a bit. Do you feel that way? Because I mean, no matter how close your parents may be to you and how much influence they have on you, they're still different beings. Right. Still different individuals. And I remember I talked to my mom. I said, "Mom, I'm doing this project called the Halfie Project." And she was like, Why do you need to do the Halfie Project? Like, what? You have an identity. You are who you are. What's the point of trying to figure this more out? And I realized I didn't know how to explain it to my own parents. Right. Do you feel this at all from your mom?
I've never really, from what I remember, talked about this particular side of me with my mom. Just whenever me and my mom are together, really it's her talking to me and just like,
yeah, did you eat well? You take care of yourself? Yeah.
Right. And I've never, and I think it was more so because of just me just wanting to keep that to myself, or I don't know, maybe it'd be a little weird talking to her about it. So I've never really talked to her about it. Now, as far as my father, when he was here and we used to talk, I remember his daily thing would, after he'd come home from work, he would go out on the back porch and he'd have a cigarette. He would read his paper until it gets dark. And so there would be times where I would just go out on the back porch with him and just sit down and we'd catch up. And I remember my dad would always, the best way I could put it is instill confidence in me as a person and as just as a Black and Korean man. He never really focused too much on race or culture too much. He just always focused on me being a good person and being confident in who I am and not caring about what people think, and not letting, the thoughts of other people like become a stronghold for me. And so having those conversations with my dad has really shaped who I am now in terms of, if someone says something negative about me because of who I am, at the end of the day, most of the time I can shake it off, right? And it's funny because if you read some of the comment sections on some of the videos where I talk about my story and talk about my cultures, there's mostly positive comments, but then there's those nasty negative ones. And I can see how that can be difficult for a lot of people to navigate and to read, especially when they're attacking you or your parents or your culture, which is something that to me is in a sense sacred to who you are. But for me, because of the way my dad used to, instill those values in me and just that confidence, I'm just like, whatever, it doesn't really faze me for the most part. And so those conversations with my dad has helped me as a person be confident in who I am.
I don't know about you. So I've had cases where I'll be in a taxi and the taxi driver will speak to me and then he'll realize, oh, you're not Korean, right? So first they'll look at my face, okay, she's Korean. Mm-hmm. And then as we're talking, he'll realize, oh, she's not Korean. And then he'll ask me, okay, where are you from? And he said, how did you come to Korea, etc. You know the conversation. It always goes the same way. And then I remember this has happened to me on a number of occasions where they seem to take it upon themselves to judge my parents.
Right.
They will say, oh, your mom left our country and married somebody else. And so the result of this terrible deed that she did is you, essentially is what he is telling me.
Right.
And I hear this a lot from the older generation. Maybe it's not so spoken now, but especially when I was younger, when I first came to Korea, and I heard this quite a lot. And I think maybe because Korea has just so much happened in such a short amount of time, and we're just a result of that as well. Mm-hmm. We face this either extreme distaste, disgust for who we are, judgment, right? Maybe it's not always so open, but that existed. Versus now with celebrities being half Korean and, everyone's, oh, half Korean, so exotic, so wonderful. And I just see this extreme dichotomy. We're always on this end, we're on this end. How can we balance? Now, this is totally rhetorical. I'm just asking this to you because I want to know.
No, let's talk. Let's figure it out together.
Yeah. How can we balance that? Like being just who we are.
Right.
How can we find that middle ground?
Right. Man, this is something that I think about all the time, because one of the reasons why I guess I could say one of my newfound purposes being here is to bring more of an awareness to people like us. One of the things that has been helping, and I feel like Korea still has a long way to go, but it's been helping, is more exposure, right? So you have the model Han Hyun-min, right? Mm-hmm. So he's doing a lot of shows, and I think the more that Korea is exposed to this, the more they can wrap their minds around, wow, this is possible. And not only that, but these are good people. They're not dirty people, or they're not, a product of a dirty relationship or anything like that. So I feel like Korea does have a long way to go as a whole, but more exposure will definitely help.
Do you think you have a big role to play in that, personally?
I think what I do and say, and just whatever platforms I'm, given or have the opportunity to take, I should use that to, in a sense, at least further the cause, so to speak, or further, I guess, this purpose that I have to expose, Korea to have Koreans like us, or really just the racial issues that we face and the cultural issues that we face. So I feel like I do have a responsibility to do it. And, I just hope that I can do it in a tactful way, in a way that's effective, so.
Bringing back to the half Korean, half Black children, those models that I was speaking to, I was speaking to their mom. And this is something she noticed that I actually hadn't noticed before, but she said, there is a new generation now of the younger kids, half Korean children. And she said, now it's split. We have half Black, half Korean, then we've got half white and half Korean. And what she's noticed as a mom is that a lot of the mothers of half white, half Korean children even mistreat her children for being half Black, half Korean. Right. Have you ever noticed that? Why do you think that is?
Wow. I don't think I've necessarily experienced that growing up, but it doesn't shock me. And, if we can get a little raw and real here, in a sense, it can be viewed as a lesser of the two evils, right? So if someone sees a relationship between a white man and maybe a Korean woman, they have kids, versus a Black man and a Korean woman, they have kids, and let's just say they're disapproving of both, but they had to choose which one, they would take out of the two, would be probably the white and the Korean. So that's kind of the undertone of what I've noticed and seen. It seems to be a little bit more accepting of, I guess, white people, and I don't know. Is that okay for me to say?
Oh, no, it's totally okay. I'm totally cool. I'm very interested in this.
Yeah, so I've noticed, I think, because a lot of my half Korean friends growing up were half white, that I can't put my finger on it, but there seems to be just a little bit of a different treatment, if that makes sense. So not that we're treated drastically worse, but it seems to be just, I don't know, kids can kind of feel, certain things. And I think I kind of felt like the white and Korean kids had just a little bit more acceptance or maybe even a little bit more advantage in the eyes of Koreans versus Black and Korean kids. And I've had a lot of half Black and Korean friends as well. So, I can't really say that with objective certainty, but that's just something that I feel, so.
Do you think there's anything that can be done about that?
Having the conversation, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the more we talk about it, the more we can come to maybe a middle ground of understanding and really just minimizing the ignorance, So I think that's one of the biggest issues is the ignorance. People just don't know, and they choose to just kind of have this mindset that just really doesn't make sense, and they want to stay in that because it's more comfortable for them. So I think having the conversation will really help.
I think you're right, and I think being half Korean myself, you're half Korean, I think it puts us in a very unique position to be able to say these things.
Right. So
I'm very appreciative of you sharing this right now and kind of playing along with my rhetorical questions, hypothetical questions. So I guess as my final question, for people who are maybe in your shoes, maybe in my shoes, being half Korean, trying to, wherever they are around the world, what is something you'd like to say? What would you like to say to them?
I think the biggest thing is just to echo what my dad used to tell me is no matter who you are, embrace who you are as a person, as a human being first, and then embrace both cultures. If you have the opportunity to explore the cultures, and if that's something that you really want to do, then go for it, and then just kind of go on that journey of self-discovery. And I think it'll be more fulfilling, if anything, So I definitely encourage, all the halfies out there to explore both sides, but always be confident in who you are and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. So that's what I would say.
Okay, Cedric, well, thank you very much. I really appreciated
thank you for having me
and sharing everything. So that just about wraps up the Halfie project. So Cedric, one more time, thank you so much.